Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos.
Yeah, it's quite a read.
Yeah, it is. We've got some excerpts here from the book, and
Yeah.
you've brought some of your own notes too.
I
So
have.
let's see what we can glean from this.
Well, it's part self-help, part philosophy.
Yeah,
And he even kind of dips into some biology and mythology.
he does. Yeah, it's a very unique blend.
It is.
So what do you think is the thread that connects all these things for him?
Well, I think that Peterson, he's really trying to get at this idea that all these different areas kind of come together to help us understand
Yeah.
ourselves and the world around us.
Okay. All right. So let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
Rule number one, stand up straight with your shoulders back.
Okay. Right.
I got to be honest. When I first saw that, I was like, really?
Mm.
Posture. Like, I don't know. But then he makes a case and he starts with a comparison
Yes.
to lobster.
Yeah, the lobster.
Lobsters.
It's a good one.
I know, right? It's a little surprising.
Yeah, but he uses that to illustrate this point about dominance hierarchies.
Okay.
And how in the lobster world, like posture is actually directly linked to serotonin. So the lobster that's like standing tall,
Uh-huh.
it has more serotonin, so it's more confident, less prone to stress and, kind of getting picked on by the other lobsters.
Okay. So, but what does that have to do with humans?
Well, he's saying that it's not that different for us,
Really?
He suggests that posture can actually impact our mood and even our interactions with other people.
Mm.
So, think about it. How do you feel when you're slouching versus when you're standing up straight?
Oh, yeah.
There might be something to that,
Yeah, maybe.
right?
And he takes it even a step further by saying that these, both our bad habits and our good habits create kind of these loops
Right.
where a small feeling or a small action, gets magnified over time.
Yeah, like he talks about how the fear of having a panic attack in public can actually make the panic attack more likely to happen.
So it's self-fulfilling.
Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And I guess what Peterson's saying is that good habits can work that same way.
Mm-hmm.
If we start with those small positive changes,
Yeah.
like improving our posture,
Yeah,
that can lead to this ripple effect and, end up having more confidence and better outcomes overall.
that's the idea.
It does make you want to sit up a little straighter.
It does.
Yeah.
He's not saying that posture is like this, cure-all,
Right.
but it's a good illustration of how much our physical state
Yeah.
can impact our mental and emotional well-being.
Okay. So now let's move on to rule number 3,
Okay.
which is make friends with people who want the best for you.
Hmm.
And
Right.
he illustrates this with a story about his friend Chris.
Yeah,
And this story really highlights how important it is to surround yourself with the right people.
it does.
So can you tell us a little bit about what happened with Chris?
Sure. So Chris was struggling with addiction, and Peterson realized that some of their mutual friends were actually kind of enabling Chris's, destructive behaviors.
Wow.
And so he really makes this argument that true friends are the ones who are challenging us
Yeah.
to grow to become better versions of ourselves.
And it makes you think about your own friendships,
Absolutely.
Like, are my friends supporting my goals?
Yeah.
Are they, celebrating my successes?
Right.
Or are they kind of holding me back?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's those people who are closest to us
Yeah.
who are unknowingly, contributing to our struggles.
Right. And it's a tough question.
It is.
But I think it's one that's worth asking. Are your relationships helping you to flourish,
Right.
or are they holding you back?
That's a great point. And this applies to all kinds of relationships, right?
Absolutely.
Not just friendships, but
Sure.
family,
Mm-hmm.
romantic partners, colleagues.
All of them.
They could all have a profound impact on us.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to rule number 9, which is assume the person you were listening to might know something you don't.
I like that one.
Yeah, and you flagged this one in your notes, so it seems like it really resonated with you.
It did.
So tell me why this rule in particular.
Well, I think it's just such a good reminder to, approach conversations with a little bit of humility.
Mhm.
We don't always have all the answers.
Yeah.
And he uses this example of a client, Miss S, who initially seemed really resistant to therapy,
Okay.
but, through careful listening, Peterson was able to create a space where she felt safe enough to actually open up
Wow.
about some past trauma that she had experienced.
So the key here is really listening.
Yeah.
and not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Exactly.
Right. And Peterson also talks about how important this kind of deep listening is
He does.
when it comes to our internal dialogues as well.
Yeah, he says that, true thinking is actually a form of listening to ourselves.
Hmm.
It's about, having that real internal dialogue where we allow different perspectives to kind of emerge
Yeah.
and to challenge each other.
He even suggests a technique from Carl Rogers
He does.
where you restate someone's viewpoint
Yeah.
before you present your own
Right.
during a disagreement.
Yeah.
And it forces you to really listen and understand where they're coming from,
You really have to listen.
even if you don't agree.
It's true.
Have you ever tried that?
I have, and it's a lot harder than it sounds, but it is a great way to avoid just talking past each other
Right.
and to have more, productive conversations.
So it seems like what he's advocating for here is a more open and honest way of communicating,
It does.
both with ourselves and with others.
Right.
But how does he connect this very individual focus
Yeah.
to like broader historical and cultural trends?
Right.
That's where it gets really interesting.
It does, because he actually uses some pretty powerful examples.
Okay.
He talks about the dangers of, totalitarian regimes, and he uses, these chilling historical events like the Soviet Union's persecution of the kulaks
Right.
and the horrors of the Holocaust to kind of, to illustrate his point.
Okay, but what does listening have to do
Yeah.
with totalitarianism?
Well, I think he's arguing that when we abandon critical thinking
Okay.
and just kind of blindly follow an ideology, we become vulnerable to manipulation and control.
Okay.
And those historical examples that he's giving are, they're really a stark reminder of what can happen when individuals kind of surrender their personal responsibility to a powerful group or a charismatic leader.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what he's saying is that by, developing our own sense of personal responsibility, that's kind of how we safeguard against these larger societal dangers.
Right.
So where do we even begin?
Well, he emphasizes, focusing on what we can control.
Okay.
Our own, thoughts, actions, choices. It's about taking ownership of our lives rather than blaming, external forces.
Yeah, that reminds me of that quote, be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly.
Start with ourselves.
Exactly.
But isn't there a danger in taking personal responsibility too far? What about like systemic issues or social inequalities
Right.
that are kind of beyond an individual's control?
That's a valid point, and he doesn't deny that those things exist.
Right.
But I think what he's saying is that fixating on those things can actually lead to a sense of helplessness and inaction.
Okay.
So he believes that by focusing on what we can control, we can actually make a positive impact on ourselves and by extension, the world around us.
So it's finding that balance.
Yeah.
Recognizing there are limitations.
Right.
But also taking responsibility.
Exactly.
All
He's
right.
not saying to ignore injustice or to pretend that everything is, just determined by individual effort. But I think that he's suggesting that that sense of personal agency is a powerful antidote to despair and apathy.
Okay, so how does this connect to this fascination that he has with stories and myths?
Right.
Because he draws a lot of inspiration from like ancient texts.
He does.
Fairy tales, all this fun stuff.
He sees these stories as repositories of wisdom that's been passed down, through generations. Yeah. He believes they reflect like these universal human experiences and psychological truths. So he analyzes like, biblical stories like Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty and Hansel and Gretel. And he finds that these narratives offer these really profound insights into, the human condition.
Right.
Our struggles with temptation, our capacity for good and evil.
And it's interesting how he brings it all back to the individual. Like he could have stayed in this realm of like, abstract ideas.
Right.
But he grounds all of his arguments in these very personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
Like, for example, he shares this really moving story about his daughter, Michaela, and her struggle with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, and that story, I think, really gets to the heart of Peterson's message.
Okay.
It's about resilience, about finding meaning in the face of suffering.
Right.
She endured years of pain and medical treatments and yet maintained this incredibly positive attitude.
And it really speaks to that power of the human spirit.
Yeah.
Our ability to overcome adversity
Hmm.
and find meaning in the darkest of times.
And it ties into Peterson's own personal journey, too.
Yeah.
He's been open about his struggles with depression and nihilism.
Wow.
He even went through a period where he lost faith in meaning itself.
Really?
Yeah.
So how did he pull himself out of that?
Well, he talks about having this kind of epiphany,
Yeah.
an irrational commitment to the essential goodness of being. He decided to choose belief,
Okay.
to choose meaning, even though he couldn't, rationally prove its existence.
It's a powerful idea.
It is, this idea of choosing to believe, even in the absence of certainty.
And he argues that this choice is at the heart of human existence.
Yeah.
We can choose to succumb to despair
Right.
and cynicism, or we can choose to believe in something greater than ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
something worth striving for.
Right. And that brings us back to this idea that being requires becoming.
Yes.
It's not a passive state. It's an active process
Right.
of continual growth and transformation.
So he believes we're all works in progress,
Absolutely.
constantly striving towards something better.
Yeah. And that's where the meaning comes from.
Yeah.
From this striving, from this commitment to becoming the best versions of ourselves.
It seems like Peterson is really giving us this roadmap for navigating all of life's complexities.
Yeah.
It's not like a set of rigid rules, but more like a framework for thinking about
Yeah.
our choices, our relationships, our place in the world.
I think so.
What do you think our listeners will find the most valuable out of all this?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is that emphasis on the interconnectedness of our physical, our mental, and our emotional well-being.
Yeah.
Like starting with something as simple as posture
Right.
can actually have these ripple effects throughout our lives.
And then there's that idea, choosing your friends wisely,
Oh, yeah.
surrounding ourselves with people who support our growth.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about, the people we choose to be around, but how we choose to communicate with each other.
Right. Learning to really listen,
Yeah.
both to others and to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a skill that can really transform our relationships and our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And then there's this whole idea of personal responsibility.
Right.
Not about blaming ourselves for everything,
Right.
but recognizing that we do have agency,
Yeah.
that we can make choices that shape our lives.
And that leads us to that big idea that being requires becoming.
Yes.
It's a call to action. It's an invitation to embrace that journey of self-improvement,
Right.
to strive towards something meaningful,
Yeah.
even in the face of challenges.
It seems like he's suggesting that meaning isn't something that we find, but something that we create
Exactly.
through our choices and our actions.
Through our choices, our actions. And he even talks about, the importance of contributing to something larger than ourselves,
Yeah.
whether that's our families or communities
Yeah.
or even humanity as a whole.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here into Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life,
Mm-hmm.
what's the one thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. Life is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's messy, unpredictable,
Yeah.
often challenging,
Oh, yeah.
but it's also filled with, opportunities for growth, for connection,
Yeah.
and for meaning. And I think Peterson's work is a reminder that we have the power to choose how we navigate that journey,
Oh.
to choose the stories that we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
and to choose the legacy that we leave behind.
That's a powerful note to end on.
Yeah,
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
my pleasure.
We'll see you next time.